He was just fixing a window. But one question changed everything. "Would you like to have dinner with us tonight?" The young mother spoke softly, afraid of rejection. But the Apache man stopped, looked into her eyes, and something inside him broke. From that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. Subscribe to the channel and discover how a simple gesture can heal old wounds and unite unlikely destinies. The storm descended upon the village of Morinos like divine punishment, transforming the gentle stream into a furious current and tearing shingles from the most fragile houses. In the small mud house at the edge of the settlement, Teresa hugged her 5-year-old daughter, while the wind howled like a wounded animal. "Close your eyes, Aniña. It will pass," she whispered, trying to convince herself more than the little girl. The glass in the only window held out until a jatoba branch, torn away by the gale, pierced it like a spear, scattering shards across the packed earth floor. The rain invaded the room without ceremony, soaking the old mattress and the few belongings piled in the corner. Teresa ran to cover the hole with a piece of punctured tarp, the last remnant of the awning her father used at the market, before leaving without warning 3 years ago. The icy water ran between her fingers as she struggled against the wind to secure the makeshift protection. Aniña, huddled in a corner, coughed forcefully. That cough had already lasted for weeks, lingering like the promises of help from neighbors that were never fulfilled. "Mom, I'm cold," moaned the little one, her lips trembling. Teresa abandoned the window and wrapped her daughter in the only dry blanket left. The night would be long. Dawn brought silence and destruction. The roofs of several houses showed gaps like toothless smiles. The broken window was just one more problem on an endless list. But with Aniña burning with fever, it became urgent. In the small village in the interior of Maranhão, wedged between hills and the forest that housed a Guajajara indigenous community, resources were scarce and judgments abundant. Teresa adjusted her faded dress, tied her hair in a bun, and took a deep breath before descending the muddy path to the village center. Her heart pounded like a drum as she approached Mr. Joaquim's store, an influential man and owner of the only construction materials shop. "I need a new glass pane and slats to fix my window," she said, keeping her gaze steady despite the shame she felt. The shopkeeper examined her from head to toe, the straw cigarette hanging from the corner of his mouth. "And how do you plan to pay, Teresa? With promises, like your father?" The 3 women selecting beans at the counter turned to observe, whispering among themselves. "I can clean your yard for a month," Teresa offered. Mr. Joaquim let out a short laugh. "My wife wouldn't like having the single mother lurking around our house at all." Teresa's face burned, but she didn't lower her eyes. "My daughter is sick. The night cold will only make it worse without the window." The old man shrugged. "Your problem. You should have thought about that before getting involved with that stranger who disappeared into the world." The women giggled softly. Teresa clenched her fists, swallowing the harsh response rising in her throat. With what dignity she had left, she turned her back and left. She wandered through the village for hours, receiving rejections and looks of contempt. Some doors didn't even open when she knocked. It was when rain threatened to fall again that Donna Irachema, the ancient midwife who lived in the last house of the village, called to her from the window. The white-haired old woman with skin as wrinkled as pequi bark received her with a glass of water and a gaze that carried no judgment. "I know you need help, my child," she said, offering a wooden bench. "How do you know?" asked Teresa, accepting the seat. "The walls have ears and I have friends." The old woman lit a pipe and blew the smoke toward the ceiling. "I know a man who can fix your window. He doesn't charge much and works well." Teresa felt hope born, timid. "Who?" "Jurandir. He lives in the Guajajara village across the river. Does carpentry work better than anyone in this village of venomous tongues?" Teresa hesitated. The idea of asking an indigenous person for help had never crossed her mind. The Guajajara kept their distance from the village, appearing only to sell crafts or exchange goods. They were respected but rarely integrated. "How can I find him?" Donna Irachema smiled, showing her almost toothless gums. "I'll send my grandson with a message. If he accepts, he'll appear tomorrow." The next day, while trying to lower Aniña's fever with cold compresses, Teresa heard knocks on the door. She opened a crack, wary, and found herself facing a tall man with broad shoulders, brown skin and black hair tied in a ponytail. He wore worn jeans and a flannel shirt, with a leather belt from which hung various tools. His eyes were deep and calm like the waters of the river after the storm. Dona Irachema sent a message, he said, his voice deep and melodious. I am Jurandir. Teresa opened the door wider, conscious of her tired appearance and the disorderly house. Thank you for coming. It's the window there. She pointed to the opening covered by the soaked cloth. Jurandir examined the damage in silence, moving with the contained elegance of someone who knows every muscle in their own body. I'll need a new glass pane, he stated. I don't have money now, Teresa hastened to say, but I can pay with work or when I sell my embroidery at the fair. The man stared at her for a few seconds, as if evaluating something beyond her words. I have a pane stored that will fit. I'll return tomorrow with it. Before she could thank him, Anina appeared in the bedroom doorway, coughing violently. Her little face was red and her eyes watery. Jurandir observed the girl with attention. Your daughter is sick. It wasn't a question. Teresa nodded, worried. Since before the storm, the rain that came in only made it worse. The man crouched until he was at the child's height. What's your name, little one? Anna, replied the girl between coughs, but Mommy calls me Anina. He smiled slightly, revealing white and perfect teeth. I have medicines that can help. I'll bring them tomorrow too. Teresa felt the weight in her chest lighten a bit. I don't know how to thank you. Jurandir stood up and walked to the door. No need. Life is already hard enough without having to charge for what's natural. When he left, Teresa stood still, looking at the path that led to the forest. For the first time in a long time, she felt she wasn't completely alone. Night came too quickly, bringing with it heavy clouds that promised more rain. While Anina slept restlessly, Teresa mended clothes by lamplight, thinking about the man with the calm gaze and calloused hands who had offered help without asking for anything in return. Outside, the wind whispered secrets among the mango leaves, as if announcing that something was about to change. The day had barely dawned when Jurandir returned, carrying a wooden frame with glass and a woven palm bag. Teresa, who had spent the night caring for her daughter, received him with deep circles under her eyes and silent gratitude. Without many words, the man set to work, measuring, cutting, and adjusting the slats with an artisan's precision. His movements were fluid and decisive, as if each gesture were part of an ancient dance. Anina, although weak, observed everything from her corner, her eyes shining with curiosity. When he finished securing the glass, Jurandir cleaned his hands on a piece of cloth and opened the bag he had brought. From inside, he removed a small package of leaves. Boil these herbs and give them to her to drink 3 times a day, he explained, handing the package to Teresa. It's jurubeba, copaiba, and wild honey. It will relieve the cough and lower the fever. Teresa took the package carefully, as if it was something precious. How much do I owe you for all this? Jurandir shook his head. Nothing, just use it well. Before leaving, he crouched near Anina and took from his bag a small carved wooden object. It was a bird, so well sculpted that it seemed ready to fly. For you, little warrior, in my village, we believe that the great Kiskadi brings joy and healing to children. The girl took the gift with trembling hands, a weak smile lighting her pale face. Thank you, she whispered. Jurandir lightly touched the child's hair and said goodbye with a wave. Through the now fixed window, Teresa saw him move away toward the trail that cut through the hill, his silhouette outlined against the grey sky. In the days that followed, Anina improved considerably. The fever subsided, the cough lessened, and color returned to her cheeks. Teresa followed Jurandir's instructions to the letter, preparing the bitter tea that her daughter drank without complaint. To her surprise, he returned a week later, bringing more herbs and some honey. This time, he accepted the invitation for coffee. Seated at the improvised table made of crates, they talked about simple things: the weather, plants, the stories Anina invented for her cloth toys. They didn't mention pasts or judgments. It was when Anina showed Jurandir her drawings made with charcoal on wrapping paper that something changed. In one of them, there were 3 figures holding hands. It's you, Mommy, and me, explained the girl with the innocence that only children possess. Jurandir stared at the drawing for a long moment, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Teresa, embarrassed, tried to change the subject, but he just smiled. It's a beautiful family, he commented, his voice slightly choked. From that day on, his visits became more frequent. He always brought something: seeds to plant, a repaired tool, stories about the forest that Anina loved to hear. Gradually, a routine was established. Jurandir would come at dusk. They would dine together on whatever Teresa managed to prepare, and then they would stay on the small porch, observing the stars while Anina slept. In the village, however, rumors grew like weeds. "Have you seen that Teresa is now hanging around with that Indian?" they whispered at the store. "As if being abandoned wasn't enough, now she's found herself a savage," they commented at church. The few customers who bought her embroidery began to disappear. Some mothers forbade their children from playing with Anina. The hostility, previously veiled, became open. Mr. Joachim especially seemed to feed the community's resentment. One morning, when Teresa went to buy flour, he intercepted her at the door of the store. "They're saying you've become the Indian's lover," he fired, loud enough for everyone around to hear. "I have nothing to do with your lives," she replied, trying to pass. He blocked her path. "Yes, you do when you bring those people to our village. Isn't it enough that you're—" He left the sentence hanging, but the implicit insult hung between them. "I just want to live in peace and raise my daughter," said Teresa, her voice trembling with contained anger. "Well, know that there are people here thinking about talking to Child Protective Services. Children need decent examples." It was like a punch to the stomach. The fear of losing Anina was her constant shadow, the nightmare that woke her sweating in the early hours. "Don't you dare," she muttered through clenched teeth. "You have 30 days to send that Indian away from your life, or we'll take measures," Mr. Joachim sentenced. "This village has traditions that need to be respected." On the way home, Teresa cried silently. The ultimatum weighed like a stone on her chest. As much as she valued Jurandir's presence, as much as Anina had flourished with his friendship, she couldn't risk losing her daughter. When he arrived that afternoon, carrying a small pot with a yellow APACHE seedling, he immediately perceived that something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, leaving the gift on the table. Teresa couldn't face him. "Maybe it's better if you don't come here for a while." The words came out strangled. Jurandir remained motionless. "Why?" She finally raised her eyes, teary. "They're threatening to take Anina from me. They say that I'm not a good example, that I'm involved with you." "And is that true?" he asked, his calm voice contrasting with the tension of the moment. "That we're involved?" Teresa felt her face burn. "I don't know, not in the way they think." Jurandir approached slowly and held her hands. They were calloused but gentle. "In my village, family isn't just those who share the same blood. It's those who choose to stay when they could leave." His dark eyes fixed on hers. "I chose to stay, Teresa, but I understand your fear." She let out a contained sob. "I have 30 days until they do something. Mr. Joachim said he's going to contact Child Protective Services." 30 days is enough time," he replied with quiet determination. "For what?" "To show the village who we really are." That night, Jurandir didn't leave. He sat on the porch and carved a piece of wood while telling Anina stories about the stars. The girl fell asleep in his lap, her head nestled against his broad chest. Teresa, observing the scene, felt something expand inside her, a feeling so big it barely fit in her chest. It was as if for the first time she glimpsed what could be a complete family. Later, when she put Anina to bed, Jurandir was waiting for her on the porch, his serious face illuminated by the crescent moon. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "Something about me, about my people, and about what it really means to be family." She sat beside him, feeling they were on the verge of an irreversible change. The night wind carried the smell of wet earth and the distant song of an owl. Jurandir took her hand and began to speak, his deep voice mixing with the sounds of the night, as if it were part of the same symphony. "My real name is Jurandir Guajajara," he began, his voice low as if sharing a sacred secret. "My father was a chief guardian of ancient traditions. I grew up between two worlds, that of the village and that of the city. I studied, learned trades, returned to teach my people." His fingers traced invisible patterns on the wooden bench. 3 years ago, I married Irasima, the shaman's daughter. We were expecting our first child when the fevers came. Teresa felt a shiver run down her spine. Jurandir continued, his eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the yard. "The disease took many. Irasima held on for 2 weeks. The baby didn't survive." There was contained pain in every word, like scars that would never completely disappear. "I'm sorry," murmured Teresa, squeezing his hand. He nodded, silently thanking her. After that, I distanced myself from everything. I worked, ate, slept, but didn't really live, until Donna Irachema called me to fix her window. His eyes met hers, intense and sincere. When I saw you struggling alone to protect Anina, something awakened in me, something I thought had died along with my family. The confession hung between them like a tangible presence. Teresa felt hot tears slide down her cheeks. I'm afraid, Jurandir, afraid to trust, to allow myself to feel. He nodded. Fear is wise when it protects us, foolish when it imprisons us. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just feeling each other's proximity, the weight of confessions, the possibility of a different future. Dawn was already advancing when they said goodbye. Jurandir promised to return the next day with a plan. As she watched him disappear into the darkness of the trail, Teresa felt strangely light, as if she had left a burden behind. The next morning, Anina woke with a high fever and a cough that shook her entire body. Teresa panicked when she saw red spots spreading across her daughter's fragile body. Measles, diagnosed Donna Irachema, who came as soon as she received the message. It's spreading through the village. 3 children are already bedridden at Mr. Benedito's house. The old midwife prepared compresses and a bitter tea, but shook her head with concern. She needs medicines from the city, Teresa, and quickly. Despair clutched her chest like a claw. I don't have enough money. I do. Jurandir's voice came from the door. He entered carrying his herb bag and a determined expression. I'm going to the city right now. Donna Irachema rose with difficulty. I'll prepare a list of what you need to buy and take a message to my nephew, who has a car. While the old woman left hurriedly, Jurandir approached the bed where Anina burned with fever. His dark eyes reflected concern and something more, a deep feeling that needed no name. He knelt beside the girl and placed his hand on her forehead. Everything will be all right, little warrior, he promised, his voice breaking. I'll bring what you need. Anina opened her feverish eyes and managed a weak smile. You'll come back, right? Always, he answered, kissing her small hand. The journey to the city took almost 5 hours between dirt roads and potholed asphalt. When he returned, it was already late at night. He brought medications, fresh fruits, and, to Teresa's surprise, his mother and sister. This is Jusara, my mother, and Patira, my sister, he introduced. They came to help. The 2 women, with features similar to his and equally skilled hands, took charge of the situation with silent efficiency. Jusara, who knew medicinal herbs like no one else, prepared baths and poultices. Potira, who had worked as a health agent, knew how to administer the medicines at the correct times. Teresa, exhausted from worry and sleepless nights, was practically forced to rest. Take care of yourself so you can care for her, said Jusara in her melodious Portuguese. We trust you. Trust us. In the 5 days that followed, the small house was transformed. The Guajajara women brought colors, smells, and ancient knowledge that mixed with modern practices without conflict. They sang songs to Anina in their native language, told stories about forest animals, braided her hair with colorful ribbons. The fever subsided, the spots disappeared, and life gradually returned. In the village, however, the news that Teresa was now housing an entire family of Indians spread like wildfire. The deadline given by Mr. Joachim had not yet expired, but rumors intensified, fueled by fear of the disease and deep-rooted prejudices. On a particularly hot afternoon, when Anina was already playing in the yard under Potira's watchful eyes, a group led by Mr. Joachim appeared at the gate. There were 5 men and 3 women, all with closed expressions. We want to talk to you, Teresa, demanded the shopkeeper. Jurandir, who was fixing the roof, quickly came down and positioned himself beside her. You can talk to both of us, he responded, calm but firm. Mr. Joachim gave him a look of contempt. We're here to inform you that the community council meeting has been moved up to the day after tomorrow. We are going to discuss your situation and the girls. One of the women, Donna Noza, a teacher at the village's only school, cleared her throat. It's for the child's good, Teresa. We need to ensure she has an adequate environment. Teresa felt her blood freeze. You don't have that right. Yes, we do, retorted Mr. Joachim. As leaders of this community, we have responsibility for everyone's well-being, especially the children's. Jurandir stepped forward. And who judges what's best for Anina? You, who never offered help when she was sick. Who excluded Teresa for being a single mother? His tone was controlled, but there was latent indignation in every word. We don't accept moral lessons from your kind, fired one of the men. We know well what kind of influence you are. That's when Donna Irachema appeared, walking slowly with her cane. Despite her advanced age, her presence commanded respect. What a shame, Joachim, she said, her severe gaze sweeping over the group. Your father would turn in his grave seeing you leading a hate campaign. The shopkeeper seemed disconcerted for a moment. It's not hate, Donna Irachema. It's legitimate concern. The old woman let out a dry laugh. Legitimate? Like the legitimate concern when you expelled Miguel's family because he had leprosy, or when you closed your doors to the drought refugees. She moved closer, leaning heavily on her cane. This village has a short memory, but I don't. And there are things I need to tell at your meeting. Mr. Joachim paled slightly. What things? Old secrets, Joachim. The kind that respectable families prefer to forget. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Donna Iracema turned to Teresa and Jurandir. I'll be at the meeting, and you should be there too. It's time for this village to face its own demons. When the group left, visibly disturbed, Teresa faced the old midwife. What secrets are those, Donna Iracema? The elderly woman smiled enigmatically. Truths that have been buried for too long. But now, we need to prepare. The battle will be difficult. That night, while Anina slept peacefully for the first time in days, the house vibrated with contained energy. Jusara and Patira prepared traditional garments. Jurandir carved a small protection amulet, and Teresa feverishly embroidered a new blouse for her daughter. 2 days before the meeting that could change everything, each armed themselves in their own way. It was Jurandir who broke the concentrated silence, calling everyone to the small living room. Seated in a circle as they did in his village for important decisions, he spoke with the serenity of those who carry ancient certainties. What we face is not just judgment about Teresa or Anina. It's the meeting of two worlds that fear each other because they don't know each other. His eyes traveled over each attentive face. But there's something I want to ask, something that goes beyond this moment. Teresa felt her heart accelerate, sensing what was coming. I want to ask permission to call Anina the daughter of my heart, not to take anyone's place, but to give name to what I already feel. A profound silence followed his words. It was Jusara who broke it, addressing Teresa with watery eyes. In our tradition, when a warrior chooses a child he didn't father as his daughter, it's a commitment for life. He is offering not just protection, but his name, his history, his place in the community. Teresa felt hot tears slide down her face. The words seemed stuck in her throat, but her heart had already answered long before this night. Outside, the crescent moon illuminated the yard where days before there had been only dry earth. Now small medicinal plant seedlings and wildflowers emerged, brought by the hands of Jusara and Patira. Like that nascent garden, something new was sprouting between them, still fragile, but with deep roots and the promise of resilience. The parish hall had never been so full. Practically all the adults from the village of Morinos squeezed onto the wooden benches, some even standing against the peeling walls. The murmur ceased when Mr. Joachim, wearing his Sunday coat, climbed onto the small platform that served as a stage. We are gathered here to discuss a delicate matter, he began, passing a handkerchief over his sweaty forehead. It concerns the welfare of the minor Ana, daughter of Teresa Santos. Teresa, seated in the first row between Jurandir and Donna Irachema, kept her spine straight and chin raised, despite the fear churning her stomach. Anina had been left in the care of Jusara and Patira, protected from the gazes and words that could hurt her. For this battle, Teresa had worn her best dress, simple blue but clean and ironed, and fastened her hair with the comb that had belonged to her mother. Jurandir wore slacks and a white shirt, his black hair carefully combed and tied. Only a necklace of wooden beads inherited from his father revealed his origins. As is generally known, continued Mr. Joachim, the girl's situation has been concerning us. A child needs structure, example, a proper home. Murmurs of agreement ran through the audience. Recently, the situation has been complicated by the constant presence of elements foreign to our community. His eyes fixed on Jurandir, who held the gaze without hesitation. I propose that we form a committee to evaluate whether the minor would be better under the temporary custody of a traditional family in the village until her mother reorganizes her life. Teresa's blood froze. Losing a niña, even temporarily, would be like having her heart torn out. Donna Noza stood up, adjusting her glasses on her thin nose. As a teacher, I can testify that little Anna has been attending classes irregularly. She often comes without adequate materials. Teresa wanted to scream that our niña missed school because she was sick, that she didn't have materials because they could barely afford food, that no one had extended a hand when they needed it. But the words died in her dry throat. It was Father Antonio, a gray-haired gentleman who had arrived in the village only 6 months ago, who asked to speak. If I may, I would like to hear the child's mother before any deliberation. It seems the just thing to do. Mr. Joachim hesitated, but ended up agreeing with an abrupt gesture. Speak, Teresa, but be brief. She stood up, her legs trembling. She looked at each face present, some hostile, others merely curious, few genuinely concerned. I have raised my daughter alone since she was born, she began, her voice initially weak, but gaining firmness gradually. I never asked anything of anyone in this village except respect. I worked day and night to give her what I could. If it wasn't enough in your eyes, it was the best I could do. She took a deep breath, feeling courage grow within her. When Anina got sick after the storm, I knocked on many doors asking for help. Most remained closed. It was Jurandir who fixed my window without charging, who brought medicines when my daughter burned with fever, who never judged or demanded explanations. Her eyes met Jurandir's, and from them she drew strength to continue. If being with someone who respects and protects us is wrong, then I don't want to be right. If loving and being loved is a sin, then I don't seek salvation. A heavy silence followed her words. It was broken by Mr. Tiao, owner of the village's only bar. And what does this Indian want with you and the girl anyway? Everyone knows these people live differently. Jurandir rose slowly. His presence, though tranquil, emanated a natural dignity that made several of those present shift uncomfortably in their seats. My name is Jurandir Guajajara, he formally introduced himself. I am a chief's son, trained in agricultural techniques, and I respect both my traditions and this country's laws. His deep voice resonated clearly in the silent hall. What do I want with Teresa and Anina? I want to be family. In my culture, family isn't defined just by blood or paper, but by choice and commitment. He paused, his eyes scanning the assembly. I lost my wife and unborn child 3 years ago to a disease that could have been prevented if there had been less prejudice and more cooperation between our peoples. I thought I would never find reason to smile again. He turned to Teresa, his gaze softening, until I met a woman who faced the world alone with the same courage as the greatest warriors, and a child whose heart was as pure as spring water. Mr. Joachim interrupted, visibly irritated. This is all very beautiful, but it doesn't change the fact that you have no legal right over the girl, and we, as a community, have the duty to protect her. That's when Donna Iracema rose, supported by her cane. Her body was frail, but there was an ancestral strength in her eyes that made even Mr. Joachim take a step back. The time for truth has come, Joaquim Becerra, she announced, her voice trembling not from fear but from anger contained for decades. You speak of protecting children and preserving morals, but conveniently forget your own past. An uneasy murmur ran through the hall. The old midwife walked to the center, each step deliberate, as if marking time. 35 years ago, a young indigenous girl came to work in the Becerra house. She was only 16. Her name was Jurema. Mr. Joachim visibly paled. That's irrelevant, he tried to interrupt. It is relevant, cut in the old woman, because 9 months later that girl gave birth to a child who was taken from her and given up for adoption in the capital, while the mother was sent back to her village, with the promise that she would never speak of the matter again. She looked directly at the shopkeeper, a child who carried Becerra blood, but who was denied and hidden. The hall exploded in surprised exclamations. Mr. Joachim, now red with anger and shame, tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. How do you know this? He finally managed to ask. Because I was the one who delivered the baby, replied Donna Iracema, and because I promised the mother that one day the truth would come to light. She turned to the astonished assembly. Before judging Teresa for accepting the love of an indigenous man, Look at your own history. This village was built on land that belonged to the Guajajara. Many of you carry that blood in your veins even if you don't admit it. Her gaze met Jurandir's, including you, my son. Jurema was your paternal aunt, which makes Joachim your relative whether he wants it or not. The revelation fell like lightning. Jurandir seemed as shocked as the others. Teresa held his hand, feeling it tremble slightly. Mr. Joachim, defeated, let himself fall into a chair. I never knew the child survived, he murmured, more to himself than to others. My father forced me to deny everything. Father Antonio, who had been observing everything with a grave expression, stood up. I believe this meeting has taken an unexpected turn, but perhaps it's providential. He walked to the center beside Donna Irachema. What I see here is not just a matter of custody, but of reconciliation, of recognizing past mistakes and seeking a new path. He turned to Teresa and Jurandir. You two have demonstrated more love and mutual respect than many couples I've blessed. Little Anna is happy and well cared for. That's evident to anyone who sees her. He made the sign of the cross in the air. If you desire my blessing, it is given. One by one, those present began to speak up. Donna Noza admitted that Anina, despite the difficulties, was an intelligent and kind child. Mr. Tiao recalled that Jurandir had always been respectful and hard-working the few times he had frequented his establishment. Even Mr. Joachim, after a long silence, stood with difficulty. I apologize, he said, his voice breaking, to Teresa, to Jurandir, and to all whom I judged unjustly. The past cannot be changed, but perhaps the future can still be different. The meeting was adjourned without a formal vote. It was no longer necessary. As people dispersed, some approached Teresa and Jurandir to offer words of support or simply a hesitant nod. Donna Irachema, exhausted by the effort, accepted Father Antonio's arm to leave. "For you knew this all along?" asked Jurandir, still processing the revelation. The old woman smiled. "I knew you were souls destined to meet. The rest, life arranged." Upon returning home, they found Anina sleeping peacefully in Jusara's lap, who was humming an ancient song. Potira had prepared a simple but comforting dinner. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. Teresa and Jurandir exchanged a knowing look. "Different than we expected," he replied, "but we have much to tell." That night, under the stars that dotted the sky of Morinos, an unconventional family celebrated their union. There were no signed papers or grand ceremonies, just the silent commitment to follow together the path they had chosen. 3 months later, the yard of the small house was unrecognizable. An exuberant garden of medicinal herbs, vegetables, and native flowers grew under the care of Jusara, who had decided to stay just for a few more weeks and ended up establishing herself permanently. Potira divided her time between the village and the town, where she had started a cultural exchange project with the local school. Anina, now completely recovered, attended classes regularly, proudly carrying a lunchbox decorated with Guajajara symbols that Jurandir had carved for her. Teresa continued with her embroidery, but now incorporated traditional indigenous elements, creating unique pieces that were beginning to be recognized and valued even in the capital. The cabin had been expanded with the help of men from the village and some residents of the town. Where before there was only a precarious room, now there was a simple but comfortable house with large windows that let in light and air. The living room window, the first that Jurandir had fixed, had gained a special frame, carved with symbols that told the story of that family. Mr. Joachim, in an attempt at redemption, had offered construction materials without charging. Gradually, the divide between the two communities diminished. It wasn't an easy or quick process, but each small gesture of approach counted. On a Sunday afternoon, as Teresa and Jurandir watched Anina playing with other children from the village and the indigenous community, she rested her head on his shoulder. "That drawing she made," she commented, remembering, "with 3 people holding hands. It was as if she knew before we did." Jurandir smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "Children see with their hearts what adults take time to see with their eyes." From across the yard, Anina ran to them, her hair decorated with colorful ribbons and her smile lighting up her face. In her arms, she carried the small wooden bird, now accompanied by an entire family of birds that Jurandir had carved for her. "Look, Dad," she called naturally, raising her collection of treasures. The words, spoken for the first time, hung in the air like a blessing. Jurandir knelt down, his eyes watering, and opened his arms. The girl ran into his embrace. Teresa joined them, forming a perfect circle that needed no explanations or justifications. There, in that piece of land that had once been a stage for loneliness and judgment, something rare and precious now grew. A family woven not by blood, but by love, chosen day after day. The window that had once been broken now framed a horizon of possibilities, showing that sometimes something must break for light to find new paths of entry. If this story touched your heart, how about sharing your own experiences of family and acceptance in the comments? Subscribe to the channel for more narratives that celebrate love in its multiple forms, and leave your like so we can continue building bridges between different worlds, just as Teresa and Jurandir did in Mourinho's.